here on your respective teams, y'all are some of the better players in the NBA. Why, when we put you all together, is it all of a sudden a problem and you guys don't necessarily know how to play winning basketball against teams with about as much talent as you have?
I just think there wasn't a lot of adjustmts, and I don't want to call the coaching staff into question because you're talking about a handful of the most dynamic coaches that you can assemble. Like Eric Spoelstra is not a bad coach. Steve Kerr is not a bad coach. I just think it's difficult when you're trying to tell a collection of individual players and brands, hey, you need to adjust. Now, he did it early. Like, I think the moment that he took Brandon Ingram out of the starting lineup, that was it for Brandon Ingram. I don't think he ever mentally said, all right, I'm into this. And, he faded, didn't play the last two games, and we never saw him since that. The moment when Anthony Edwards, who said, I'm going to be a scorer on this team, gave you basically just one end of the court where he was dominant. Now, he could have been dominant on both ends, but he wanted to be a scorer. And I think a lot of guys saw that. I think that impacted Jalen Brunson. I think that impacted, Jaren Jackson Jr., that some of those guys weren't committed to play the way that they needed to play on both ends of the floor. And then, again, it's hard when you're telling $200 million players, because all of those guys, one of the stories that came out, Joe Varden wrote this for The Athletic, is that before they played their first exhibition, everybody on that roster had gotten paid, like in excess of $100 million plus for their contracts for the most part, with the exception of a couple at the end. But, these guys are all comfortable. They're all situated, and they haven't really accomplished a whole lot. But at the end, when they had a chance to come together and do it, they just didn't have it. And that's unfortunate. I think it's a lot of guys that are going to go back to the drawing board. And if Steph Curry and LeBron James and Anthony Davis and these guys want to play, obviously they'll have invitations to play. I think there'll be 3 or 4 players from this current roster who will still be invited back for next year regardless. And I believe Jaren Jackson Jr. will be one of them if he chooses to come back and wants to do it.
Okay, let's expand on that, because in terms of figuring out how to play winning basketball and some of the lack of adjustments from the coaching staff, Jaren Jackson Jr. was a big piece of that. And a lot of eyeballs on the reigning defensive player of the year, a lot of people quick to jump on some of the struggles that he had, particularly with rebounding and playing in that true center position. What would you have liked to have seen differently from Jaren, and why is he still a potential good fit for what this group could look like next summer?
Because I think you have to, you realize you have to have more protection around him up front. You got to have a rebounder playing alongside him if you're going to put him at center. And I think if you're going to put him at power forward, then he's at his natural weak side defender position. So I think him as the answer by himself at center around a bunch of wing guys, that's not the key. That's not what you're going to get. Because power players will go straight to him. CJ pointed it out. Bennett pointed it out before that, leading up. Montenegro was going to go right at him. Vucevic said, all right, look, I'm going to get this guy in foul trouble. Jonas was like, I basically raised this guy when he came into the league. I know his weaknesses. I'm going to get him in foul trouble. And you saw time and time again, experienced big centers who love playing physical basketball understood how to get him in foul trouble. And even Daniel Tice and some of the German guys understood how to go at him. So, the thing is, Jaren has to be able to make that adjustment. I think once he realized he didn't have the cover on the perimeter from some of the guards that needed to do their job, exposed them a lot more. And it's hard to chew a guy out when you're only going to be teammates with him for a handful of games. And, you're like, man, is it really worth, going into the trenches and digging into this guy to say, hey, look, man, you got to help me out. I don't think too many guys wanted to ruffle feathers at a certain point, especially when they got really, really pressure packed. And I think that impacted the way they defended and the way that they played and the way they communicated towards the end.